Hello, welcome back to the Notts TV debate with me, Frances Finn, and four local Nottinghamshire panellists: Jane Hadfield, Simon Gray, Richard Baker and Simon Matthews. And I'm Frances Finn. Now this week, 40 schools, at least 40 schools in Nottinghamshire closed because of a strike by the National Union of Teachers. Nationally, they reckon about 1 in 3 schools had to close. Many, of course, did stay open. Now, this is a strike that's been ongoing now about teachers' pay, budgets, funding for schools, working conditions within schools, the expectation placed on teachers. It's a big one, really. I think the NUT is calling for more of a kind of sea change, an attitude change by the government, and a lot of criticisms levelled at Nicky Morgan. But not everyone's been happy to have to take a day off work to look after their children in those 40 schools in Nottinghamshire. So are teachers doing the right thing? Are they right to withhold their labour, Simon, on an issue that they're passionate about?
I believe that everybody has a right to withhold their labour if they feel strongly enough. Otherwise, I think that's tantamount to slavery.
They have the right, but yeah. Are they right?
I'm not so sure. I know for a fact that recently, I think the NUT is suggesting that teachers are working between 65 and 70 hours a week. That's a long week. And that's a lot of work. If they feel that strongly, and if they feel that that's the last resort, and their only recourse is to down tools to bring the attention of the government and people to bear, then I think they are right.
They would argue, teachers, that they are doing this ultimately, of course, for their profession, but also for our kids, because they have said in the past that it's children that matter here, their education matters, and are they getting the best education when they've got tired teachers who aren't able to give their best? But striking is quite a radical step when talking also can work.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the last resort, but if they're not listened to, what else can they do? They've got to withdraw the labour and get the attention of government. But who pays the price for this thing? It's the kids, it's the parents who've got to take the day off work. It's the inconvenience. But if you don't get listened to, you've got to go to extremes, haven't you?
The government says that it has not decreased funding in schools. In fact, funding is at its highest level ever in schools. But again, on the ground, within schools, we're hearing a different story. Yeah. Jane, whose side are you on here?
Well, yes, I think if it is the last resort, then they have to strike, but they should just do as they have a one-day strike, and it does inconvenience everybody. But have they looked all avenues before they've got to striking? Because in my mind, they are then letting the children down, letting down the parents who've got to look at alternatives for the day. But I believe that they need to go out and talk to the government. The unions need to do the best they can within the government to make sure that they get their views across, because they are there teaching the children. They are the ones on the ground knowing what happens.
If you were a parent though, Richard, who's been fined for taking your kids off to Marbella for an extra day, and then the head teacher who's fined you happens to be in the NUT and says, actually, I'm going to shut my school today, you'd be a little bit cheesed off, wouldn't you?
I think what makes me cheesed off more than anything else is the fact that these things tend to get seen as political arguments rather than discussions about the future of education. Now, I am a parent. I've got 2 daughters in school at the moment, and it kind of feels like a battle to get through the educational landscape sometimes, because it just seems to be a sea of constant change, and you yearn for a period when they sorted these arguments about, when we knew what kind of exams they would be taking, we knew whether or not they were going to be judged by league tables results or their ability to get a job. And here we have an argument between the NUT and the government, and you sit there on the sidelines thinking, well, fine, have your argument. I don't know whether this is making my life any better as a parent or it's making schools better for my kids.
Yes, I do care that teachers are not being excessively squeezed and pressured, because I want good people to be in our schools to teach our kids, in the next 10, 20, 50, 100 years' time. But if the message we're getting... They are really struggling to recruit, aren't they?
They are struggling to recruit.
Yes. So I wonder what the answer is then. I mean, is more money the answer? Is it less regulation? Is it
I think less
testing?
regulation, definitely, because I think when they were talking about working 65, 70 hours a week, my friend's a teacher in London, And, you know, she emails me about 11:30 at night. She's just finished doing her marking. You know, to me that is ridiculous. I mean, doing some marking, yes, she said, but a lot of it is a lot of admin that she has to do in her free time in school when she could be sitting down doing a marking.
That's a really powerful point. You know, I mean, my wife works in a school, and some of the things that I see, that the kind of processes and bureaucracy that she has to navigate to get the job done, it's nothing. You know, it's
Far
worse than
removed from
Europe
actually
almost.
teaching children.
Absolutely.
A teacher's
down to
there
the
to
job.
teach,
They
front of
teach-
house,
yep.
with the kids. Everything else should be secondary.
But, you know, in defence of government strategy over the last few years, and it started with Tony Blair's government, really, didn't it? Regulation, monitoring, testing, and so on. I think our children are getting a service that perhaps, you know, I think back to when I was at school. In my comprehensive school, some teachers would just swan in. They'd clearly done no planning. They'd just on the fly, say a bit, say open your textbook at page whatever. And it was fine for those of us that actually got on and did the work at home ourselves to get through exams. But for those that weren't quite so switched on, they'd get left behind. And, you know, that's not good enough, is it? You can't allow that to carry on.
Well, you can't, but, you know, we're talking about pressure on teachers. Think about the pressure on pupils now. There is so much regulation, exams, testing that they have to go through. So, you know, when I was coming up, yeah, there was a few teachers I had that were exactly as you described. But we didn't have all that pressure as pupils, and this is probably a similar pressure that the teachers are feeling due to too much regulation.
Yes. All right. Now, talking of regulation, there is a new rule that's come in as far as how schools are measured. I say new, it's been around a while now. And that is when you look at the internet and search for the league table to find your local school on, it'll be placed according to how that school has performed at GCSE, very often, in certain core subjects. Those core subjects do not include any creative arts subject like music, art, drama, even design and technology. And schools now are worried that they are seeing a drop-off in the number of children taking these topics, but also funding for things like music. If an academy chooses where to spend its money, why would it spend its money on a subject that is not measured? And so there's been a petition, and it's been debated in Parliament to get a creative arts subject included in one of those measured subjects. Would you support that or not? Because
Yes, 100%.
would you?
Oh, definitely. I mean, the children who aren't always academically bright, but they excel in things like design technology, and they're obviously children of all mixed abilities going to different schools, and I think schools should have that as a measure.
The reason that the government introduced this was that it was finding that kids from poorer backgrounds were not taking these core subjects like history or sciences as much as their better off counterparts. And it argues that you need that kind of education to go on and get proper jobs, go on and do further education. So the government says it's working. This policy is working in getting kids better educated in those core subjects. But who's to say what a core subject is?
I think it's old-fashioned thinking, and I think the big trick that the government misses is that they don't give young people the right careers and employability education in school. You know, when people are thinking about what subjects they're going to take, you know, we should be talking to them about that earlier, giving them an appreciation as to what the world of work looks like, so they can make an informed choice. But we don't do that.
Richard, if you were going to employ a young person to come and work for you, when you're looking at their GCSEs, what's going to impress you more, music or physics?
I don't think I'm necessarily going to look at the subject. What I'm going to look at the result and judge it on the basis of the individual that's in front of me. I want somebody who's got a great attitude, who wants to achieve something in life. And results themselves don't always tell you that story. It's about judging people as individuals. The education system is a bit of a sausage factory. It tends to try and fit square pegs into square holes. Not everybody's like that. We do need opportunities for people to excel in ways which will work for them, not just the system.
I have a cousin who's a music teacher and has actually just packed in being a music teacher at school because of some of the things we've already touched on. But she is passionately defending the fact that music is actually an academic subject.
Music,
and
very
particularly
much
when you
is.
get to A-level, it's intensely mathematical.
It is.
And it is quite rigorous. It's not easy to pass music.
It's very hard to pass music.
Yeah.
We're back to regulation again, aren't we? And too much interference. far too much interference. Not everyone's going to be good at maths, English, but they might be fantastic at music, and they should have the opportunity to do that.
There's a school in Aspley, and I've mentioned it many times now. I'm making a short film about it because they are so passionate about music. Trinity School in Aspley. Every single pupil in the school has access to a musical instrument. And they have 9 full-time music teachers, 22 orchestras and bands. But 42% of their children come from the bottom 10% of social disadvantage, if you like. And yet their GCSE and A-level performance is way beyond what you'd expect. And they believe that's partly down
to the music.
They're inspired by something other than passing exams.
I think music
creates a culture.
Taps into creativity in whatever subject you're doing. Being able to think creatively, to think spontaneously and outside of the box will benefit you. So music and drama and art, there's no reason why they should be cut out as seen as less than, because we are whole people with emotions and an intellect. And if we cannot engage all of that, then you're missing a trick there. Well, and I believe we need a much, much broader based education approach from the beginning.
That has, just again to put the government view across, that has happened quite a lot before these core subjects were introduced. And they are now going to discontinue 28 new types of GCSE that have been developed in sort of non-core subjects. I mean, you can have a GCSE in almost anything, it seems, because schools are offering these GCSEs to the kids because it might sort of improve their results performances. And as a result of too many of these spurious ones, the danger was the core ones were being.
But this is the kind of chop and change that we don't need, where people need to be able to see, what am I going to study? What are the opportunities for me? As Simon said earlier on, careers education, where might this lead?
Okay.
Stop messing about with it.
And that brings us back to the first topic of this bit of the show, doesn't it? There's more to come in a moment.